Welcome to Earth Archives. Many friends should know Spartacus from literature, film and television works. The most famous gladiator in the history of the Roman Empire, he and his companions set off the largest rebellion in the history of the empire. Today we will talk about his tragic life. Before the show starts, please subscribe, like, and turn on the little bell. If possible, leave your thoughts. This will help the growth of the show. Without further ado, let's officially start. According to extant records, Spartacus hailed from Thrace, a region nestled in the southeastern corners of Europe, where the relentless Roman conquests of the 1st century BC frequently cast their shadow. His origins, veiled in the mists of time, suggested a stint in the Roman auxiliary forces before straying from that path, perhaps driven by a thirst for vengeance or a longing for freedom. Captured at some juncture, he found himself transported to the heart of Rome, where he was sold into slavery to a man known sometimes as Vatia. Vatia, a shadowy figure within the sprawling Roman Empire, owned a gladiator school nestled roughly 120 miles southeast of Rome, amidst the rugged landscape of Capua. It was within the confines of this school, amidst the clangor of swords and the roars of the crowd, that Spartacus forged his new identity, a gladiator. Yet, beneath the veneer of obedience, the fire of rebellion still smoldered in his heart. In those hallowed halls of combat, Spartacus found comrades, and together they plotted an audacious escape. In the dead of night, armed with knives, cleavers, and whatever makeshift weapons they could lay their hands on from the confines of the kitchen, they rose as one against their captors. Over 70 gladiators, bound together by chains of oppression, now surged forth into the uncertain embrace of freedom. Among those who fled beside Spartacus was his wife, a woman of Thrace whose name has been lost to the sands of time. In the annals of the 2nd century, the words of the writer Plutarch echoed her presence. A prophetess consumed by ecstasy, a devotee of Dionysus, the god of revelry and liberation. When Spartacus awoke to find a serpent coiled around his head, she interpreted it as an omen, a portent of the great and terrible fate that awaited him. Spartacus and his band of fugitives acquired gladiatorial weapons from a passing cart and set forth towards Mount Vesuvius. This was before the eruption that would mark the mountain's place in history. In Spartacus' time, it was covered in vines, surrounded by fertile fields. On their journey, Spartacus and his comrades, Crixus and Oenomaus, raided the countryside for supplies and recruited slaves. Rome did not take Spartacus' growing power seriously. As he made his breakout, the Republic's armies were engaged in Spain, southeastern Europe, and Crete. Furthermore, a group of runaway slaves was not seen as a serious challenge to Roman soldiers. The Romans dispatched a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber to suppress the slaves. He and another later dispatched named Publius Varinius, commanded no regular citizen legions, but instead commanded any troops they could hastily recruit on the spot, wrote the 2nd century writer Appian. Glaber's makeshift army didn't even attempt to attack Spartacus. Instead, they blockaded the main routes to Mount Vesuvius, camping and attempting to starve him out. Spartacus took proactive measures, having his newly liberated slaves weave ropes from wild vines so they could maneuver up the slopes to where the Romans were less defensively vigilant. The Romans at the camp never saw their approach. The slaves were able to surround them and shock the Romans with sudden attacks. When the Romans fled, the slaves occupied their camp, wrote Plutarch. This success led to a flood of new recruits joining Spartacus' ranks. At this time many sturdy, swift-footed shepherds and herdsmen from the surrounding country joined the ranks of the slaves. The growth of Spartacus' power was also fueled by other factors. Throughout his rebellion, his army spent most of its time in rural villages and towns, places with weak defenses but abundant slaves. Additionally, according to ancient accounts, Spartacus insisted on sharing plunder equally, making recruitment easier. Spartacus continued to ambush and defeat Roman armies, while freeing slaves and gathering supplies. Back in Rome, the Senate grew impatient and dispatched a sizable force led by consuls Lucius Geflius Publicola and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus. Each may have commanded 10,000 soldiers. By the spring of 72 BC, Spartacus likely commanded a force of 40,000, some of which stayed in southern Italy with his co-leader Crixus, while the rest, under Spartacus' command, marched towards the Alps. This proved less than ideal for the rebel forces. The Roman army led by Lentulus caught up with Crixus, killing the leader and many of his rebels. Subsequently, Lentulus advanced from the south towards Spartacus, while apparently ahead of Spartacus, Lentulus's co-commander Clodianus moved from the north. Spartacus found himself trapped between the two armies, both likely better equipped with weapons and armor than his own. But what both commanders seemed not to anticipate was that Spartacus had built up a sizable cavalry force in the preceding months. The Thracians were known for their horsemanship, even able to tame wild horses. Spartacus suddenly charged them and engaged them in battle. He defeated Lentulus's envoys and took all their supplies, wrote Plutarch. Glaber was either defeated by Spartacus or forced to retreat. Spartacus not only escaped the trap but dealt a heavy blow to the Roman army, enabling his forces to march towards the Alps. After defeating another Roman army led by the governor Gaius Cassius Longinus, Spartacus' army could now freely ascend the Alps, heading towards Gaul, Thrace, or other regions beyond Roman control. However, for reasons lost to history, Spartacus chose not to do so, but turned his army back towards Italy. Why he did so remains a mystery. Whatever the reason, Spartacus led his army southward, traversing Italy, overcoming resistance along the way, until reaching the Strait of Messina, hoping to cross to Sicily, an island ripe with agriculture and slaves awaiting liberation. The Strait of Messina, though small, in some places only 2 miles wide, presented some challenges for Spartacus as he attempted to cross it. He arrived at the strait in the winter of 72-71 BC, when the weather was cold. Additionally, Gaius Verres, the Roman governor of Sicily, reinforced some of the better landing points. Spartacus needed two things: good ships and good sailors, to allow his vanguard to land at the strait. He sought the aid of a group of pirates known to frequent the area, the Cilician pirates, as Plutarch termed them, noting that they were equipped with fast ships and naval knowledge essential for Spartacus' successful crossing. However, the pirates had other plans. Though the Cilicians made an agreement with Spartacus and accepted his gifts, they deceived him and sailed away, wrote Plutarch. It's unclear whether the pirates were bribed by the Romans or simply didn't want to get involved. Undeterred, Spartacus ordered his forces to construct their own ships. While they succeeded in building many vessels, their attempts to cross the strait failed, leaving his forces stranded on the Italian mainland. This left Spartacus with no choice but to march north, facing a more ruthless Roman leader than any he had encountered before. As Spartacus reached the strait, a new leader named Marcus Licinius Crassus had taken command of the Roman army. Strauss noted that he was wealthy, able to raise a massive army, and at least partially funded them out of his own pocket. Spartacus responded by offering peace to Crassus, but Crassus quickly refused. Perhaps seeing his soldiers beginning to falter, Spartacus cemented their resolve, nailing a Roman soldier to a cross for all to see. It showed his own men what would happen if they didn't win, wrote Appian. Spartacus ultimately broke through Crassus' trap, filling Crassus' trenches, allegedly with bodies, and breaking through with his cavalry. When Spartacus escaped Crassus' trap, he faced severe consequences. Ancient writers say he lost thousands of soldiers in the breakout. Furthermore, divisions emerged within the rebel camp. A dissenting faction led by Cactus and Gannicus, including many Celts and Germans, broke away from Spartacus and departed on their own. Additionally, Crassus' forces were essentially intact, with a third force led by Marcus Terentius Varro Lucullus about to land at Brundusium. And the third force led by Pompey was heading from Spain to Italy. Spartacus' army was now splintered, besieged, and the final battle was imminent. In the spring of 71 BC, Spartacus' plight unraveled further. Cactus and Gannicus were likely defeated by Crassus in the Battle of Cantenna before April. Spartacus was now further isolated. After the Battle of Cantenna, he received word that Lucullus's force had landed at Brundusium, shattering the rebels' hope of using the port to escape Italy. What happened next is difficult to explain. Spartacus could have attempted to go to another port, or to other areas of Italy. His army wasn't completely trapped, and he likely had at least 30,000 soldiers who could fight. However, for reasons unknown, he decided to turn back and attack Crassus. Whether Spartacus truly wanted this or if his subordinates decided for him remains unclear. The final battle took place in April of 71 BC. Strauss says we can't be sure where the battle occurred, but it likely was somewhere in the upper Salaris Valley. Spartacus' strategy seemed twofold, with his cavalry attacking Crassus' archers and slingers, while Spartacus led his infantry in an attempt to kill Crassus himself, hoping to break his army. Crassus constructed trenches to block Spartacus' cavalry, and when Spartacus' soldiers jumped in and attempted to stop their construction, it sparked a frenzy of melee. Ultimately, Spartacus and Crassus arranged their soldiers to engage in battle. Plutarch wrote that just before the battle, Spartacus dismounted, killed his horse, and told his men, if he won this battle, he would have many fine horses belonging to the enemy, but if he failed, he would lose nothing but himself. No horse was needed. The battle went poorly. Spartacus' cavalry apparently couldn't reach Crassus' missile troops. Unfazed, Spartacus led his troops, on foot, in a charge towards Crassus himself. It's said that Spartacus in this final attempt cut down 2 centurions but to no avail. Different accounts exist regarding Spartacus' death, but all end with him being surrounded and killed. After his death, his army disintegrated, and Crassus and other Roman forces hunted down the remaining rebels. Spartacus' body apparently was never identified. Strauss noted that he killed his horse before the battle, likely didn't adorn himself in his armor. Spartacus' last struggle may have left only a severely disfigured corpse of an ordinary soldier, wearing ordinary armor. He likely was buried in a mass grave alongside his other troops. Even if archaeologists were to find it one day, they may not be able to distinguish the renowned commander from his troops. Although Spartacus' rebellion was ultimately suppressed, his memory lingers, more significant than those of the Romans who fought against him or opposed him in other ways. Who remembers Crassus today? Pompey? Even Cicero isn't so remembered. On the other hand, everyone has heard of Spartacus.